lot. We put together a pretty interesting project for those of you that were able to see it. We have some new updates for you, and Dan and I are going to leave here today and go and select the architect by next week for his new building. So, thank y'all for letting us come back.
And that was one of the first thing that got us excited about working with Donald. Is the first question I asked him was, Donald, what if I set up something and it's down in Lincoln County, or what if it's down in South Carolina and it helps somebody else? So, and that was important. That was the most important question we had, and it's certainly been a good, because that's important. You know, we don't want to be like this. I mean, it's because we've just seen too much. We can't be restricted on that kind of stuff, and our thinking's got to be more broad than that. So, anyway, that's that gives you a little idea where we're at. You know, we hope to be in there in a year and a half to 2 years, and certainly that's gonna help us a ton to try to do what we need to do. But does anybody have any? I don't know if you want to do questions or whatever.
Yeah, it'd be good to do questions now. As you're asking your questions, though, realize that this presentation is going to tie into what Dewey and Donald are going to talk about just a little bit, because this is an integral part of the project there. And so there'll be a continuation. But if you've got specific questions about the Manufacturing Solutions Center, now's the time to ask them. Yes.
Do you have inroads to make, to put out feelers for capital in association with what you're doing in the implementation of manufacturing?
That's probably the hardest one we get. Certainly, Bill and his group is a real good resource on that, and trying to figure out what is the best way. A lot of it is really tough, because you run into folks that run their credit cards up to the max and
Spend their 401k.
Yeah, put their and spend all their relatives and anybody else they can talk into it. So that's a huge thing. We're looking at some of the things. Tomorrow they have the session over at CVCC with from the Rural Center. We want to go check that out very closely to see what other ways can we get it with capital that can help them get going, because that's always an issue. It really is. That's a big.
Because the micro lending thing, we've talked with you about that before.
That's a lot of times $5,000, $10,000 would be a huge deal for somebody. That and time. They always underestimate their time constraints. They've got a full-time job and they think, okay, now how you gonna go to these trade shows? Who's gonna do it? Who's gonna go visit all these stores? That's a real good question. I like to say I had everything down. We're still learning, and we're trying to tap every resource we can to try to figure it out.
One of the things that we've looked at doing too is you can find lending in certain categories. And so what we've tried to do is create a project where there's local government support, you've got brownfield specialized lending for that, things like that. And so we want to answer all the questions by putting together a fairly good project in an environment that allows that. So trying to create that situation to where we could have micro lenders be interested, or take advantage of low interest loans from government agencies, things like that. It's not going to be impossible, but we really are creating something that's a little different. And so hopefully with the private sector support, what MSC is doing and what the city's trying to do, with help from other agencies, we'll see if we can get something going. But that's been the big issue that we've not been able to tackle yet. Every time we come to it, we're going, okay, let's approach it this way. We'll try that a little while. And I think we've been a victim a little bit of the economy, because the banks have changed their lending practices quite a bit. And it was always funny to see, we were making this presentation to the Brownfields Conference for North Carolina, and had this huge response. I mean, people just couldn't believe what we had done. And one of the bankers had presented before us, and the question that was asked him is, well, have the banks really changed their lending practices? He said, no, we're just enforcing them. And you're sitting there going, so I had to stand up and ask the question. About 3 years before that, a private investor that had came to us as a development company wanted to help us develop part of this project. And they had went to this very same bank and were turned down. And they had asked if the bank would consider, now this is before the economy went down, wanted to know, would all the grants and the investment that the city had made could be leveraged so they could get their loan to do part of the project. I told them no. At the end of that meeting, the guy come over to me and said, "We'd like to talk to you." They didn't take the time, they didn't care to see what was happening then. And once they saw the reaction everybody else in the community had, so we've had a few good conversations with them, and they're a North Carolina-based bank, so it's interesting.
And the other thing, obviously, is we try to get them to get some cash flow as fast as we can. That's the other thing, because right now it's really hard to get cash. It really is. We need to be doing that. Any other questions?
I noticed Coors was one of your customers. Is that a weekend testing?
That is the most, that's the most important contribution to mankind we've ever done. Because, the little blue mountains that go up when it's cold? Well, they called us one of their supplier. It's actually done with a phase change material, and their supplier of phase change material called us, and they wanted. We actually did the testing to make sure they're in that process of making those phase change material. There's formaldehyde in there, and we did the formaldehyde, and still continue to do formaldehyde checking to make sure there isn't any formaldehyde, so that when it's good and cold, that you won't get sick. Yes. So that's an important thing. So when you see the little blue mountains, we're real proud of that one. But they haven't sent us any samples. They were all empty cans. It's kind of hard on the community college campus to, we can't just put this can on there. It'd be bad to have a bunch of cans sitting around in the lab. But
Any other questions for Dan?
I think while they're doing that, one thing I want to mention too, that when we sat down with them and they asked us about, were we concerned about if they done a project in South Carolina, Lincoln County, wherever, Conover, one of the themes we've always had is, yes, we'd like to have every job in Conover. We know that's not going to happen. So if it can't be there, we want it in Talbot County. And if it can't be there, we want it in the region. And if it can't be there, we want it in the state. And so when we were talking to them about this, we told them, that's fine. There's more than enough empty buildings around here in Alexander County, Caldwell County, Iredell County, everywhere that you can fill them up. So the whole concept is for them to get up and add this new program of these business accelerators and to create new business and cultivate that. The plan is to get them to a situation to where they could fill some of these spaces, these underutilized business spaces, recreate these small niche marketing manufacturers that are high-tech, folks that are operating machines, able to reproduce, also to change on a moment's notice to adapt to their customers' needs. They're not going to be thousands of employees at one facility anymore. If you have a couple hundred, that's going to be the way it is. But we have it in our genes to do this. This region's done this for 150 years. Our ancestors came here. Most of them were escaping religious persecution, or like mine, debtor's prison. Came here and they had to build their own schools, their own churches, and their own factories. So we have the ability to do it. We still have the core manufacturing folks here, and we have that process. And so that's one of the things, one of the assets. We have these buildings. We have a key group of folks like y'all to help us, but we also have the ability. We've done it before. Now there's a crisis point that's forcing us to go back to those roots and figure out how we're going to rebuild the economy. So it's an opportunity. It's a terrible way to do it. That's what's happening. We're forced to make modifications. So if we do it the right way, we'll be able to continually adapt from here on out and create companies that can adapt and change the way they do business.